I'm Kim Bailey and this is Floral Art Review, where we use our AI DesignEye to analyse an old design of mine, a competition design, on the principles and elements of design, the way we are judged in competition, to give us some feedback on the design itself and then some suggestions for improvement. This week we're looking at Caught in the Net, which was an interpretive design staged on the bench, as you can see, and we had a space of 70 centimetres to use. The height was unlimited and it was judged from the front. Now I've used here a timber block as the base and two upright metal rods as the stand. On one side I've put some seaweed, that some of it has been bleached and some is left as in its natural state, and the other rod is covered with the seaweed but at a much finer detail, so much closer to the rod. Between those two, I made a net out of some rope that has been made with agapanthus foliage, and on the website floralartonline.com, and you'll see it in the description for this video, you can see how that technique works. Now within the net itself, so that was the net and that was how I wanted things caught into it, and I have put some other items that you might find at the seaside or caught in a net at the seaside. So we've got some Norfolk pine fronds and some other foliage and other bits of seaweed and just generally things that you would find caught up in a net that would be on the beach, so to speak. So let us see, I should say, in the competition itself, this design received a highly commended, and that was based on the techniques that I had used, both the net itself and the drying of the seaweed and using seaweed as a plant material, which it is. And that was the first time they'd seen it in a competition of this kind. The judging review at the time said that there wasn't enough colour in the design and the net wasn't prominent enough. So let's see now what AI has got to say about this design in terms of the principles and elements of design. So an overall view, first of all, this structural and conceptual floral design is an intriguing interpretation of the theme Caught in the Net. The composition uses organic materials, woven structures and contrasting textures to communicate a sense of entrapment and entanglement. So pretty good in its overview of what it's seeing. The warning signs for me is that it's structural and conceptual floral design. So I think there's going to be a few suggestions about what I could do to improve it. So let's have a look. Balance, first of all. The design achieves asymmetrical balance with a heavier vertical mass on the right side, contrasted by an open, lighter section on the left. The heaviness of the dark materials on the right is counteracted by the woven netting on the left, preventing a side heavy appearance. I think in looking at it now, it's still pretty visually heavy, and that's because of the darkness of that seaweed that's on that right hand side. The base appears stable, though the weight distribution could be refined slightly to ensure visual and physical stability. Now, that's an interesting comment because it was very stable. I wonder why. I guess it's just that weight distribution of it looking like the material on the right hand side could possibly be physically much heavier, and so it might be a little bit unstable. You will note that even though I've taken this image from an angle, the design itself is placed at an angle on the bench, and I've talked about that before, and that's so that it allows for some depth in the design where I haven't got enough physical depth. The visual change in its presentation means that I get some depth to the design by that, looking at it at a slight angle. So let's move on to proportion and scale. The structure's height and width create a visually striking form fitting well within its spatial limits. That's a good thing. The netting and plant materials are proportionate, though the central mass could be slightly refined to enhance the distinction between the net and the caught elements. And I think that's very true. I think it's looking just a bit too full, a bit too bulky. You can see some of the net as it comes out over the front of the design, but there's just too much in there, and the net is not as focally dominant as it should be. Because it's caught in the net, we would normally look at the title being the first word, being important, so things have to be caught, but it has to be clear that they are caught in the net, not just at the side of the net or in other places. So that's definitely something that I would look to improve next time around. Rhythm and movement. The design has dynamic movement with the flow of netting leading into the tangled, trapped elements. The curved and linear elements guide the eye, reinforcing the theme of being ensnared. The extension of plant materials outwards adds to the sense of organic entrapment. I don't mind some of that material on the left-hand side being out of the confines of the two upright rods, but where the Norfolk pine foliage is coming out on the right-hand side, for me, it's taking my eye out and away from the design, and it doesn't enhance my interpretation. I'm very unhappy now that I look at it with those placements of that on the right-hand side of the design. Contrast and dominance. The contrast between light and dark elements is strong, reinforcing the idea of struggle or tension. The dominant vertical mass effectively conveys the feeling of being trapped, but it could be balanced with a more defined focal point within the net itself, which is exactly what I was talking about earlier, is that right-hand side is very dominant, and it's dark and it's bulky, and it's not really clear what is caught in the net. If I wanted that part of it to be the caught in the net, I should have had the net come around the outside of that, not behind it. The green woven elements add contrast, but they could be enhanced with slight variation in colour to strengthen depth. So that's talking about the net, I think, at the top of the design itself, and that needs to be, because of the background where this competition was held, we don't have a plain background, it's the wall of the building. So I knew that was going to be the case. I needed to keep that in mind and have something that behind the design, or that is part of the design, that would enhance or brighten that area, or have as it says, have slight variation in colour to strengthen the depth of that part of the design. Unity and harmony. The materials and structure work together cohesively, maintaining a naturalistic yet sculptural feel. The woven netting integrates well with the organic materials, reinforcing the theme. The darker mass might need slight refinement to better integrate with the rest of the design. Again, that's something that we've talked about now a couple of times in a couple of different areas between the principles and elements of design, and that's important. That I think I've talked in other videos about, if you get it right in the principles or the elements, then overall it's going to be a good design. But where you start to see the same thing, some part of your design not meeting the requirements over some of those areas of those principles and elements of design, then you know that's the area that you've got to focus on to improve it. Line. The design incorporates strong vertical and diagonal lines, creating movement and energy. The woven netting introduces soft curved lines, contrasting with the angular trapped elements. I think that in an overall sense, it's got very strong vertical lines. I don't see so much the diagonal lines, but obviously there's movement. There's the curved, to me, elements create more movement than the diagonal lines, but definitely a very strong vertical interpretation. Texture. A variety of textures is evident, from rough, crumpled foliage to smooth woven fibres and rigid plant structures. This textural diversity enhances the sense of organic realism while maintaining an artistic interpretation. It's probably not my best effort at contrasting textures. I think there's probably too much rough texture. Where it talks about the smooth woven fibres, that's the netting, and it's not, when you visually inspect it closely, it's not as smooth as it appears in the photo, but it has to judge on the photo, so we'll go with what it is. But for my mind, knowing what it looked like in person and looking at the image now and remembering what it looked like when the competition was on, I felt at the time that there wasn't enough contrast in the text. There was enough smoothness in some of the textures. Colour. The dark earthy tones contrast with the green and yellow highlights, creating visual impact. The netting's muted green blends with the natural tones, but a slight introduction of a bolder accent colour could add more dimension. I think that's very true. I think it needs something a little bit brighter in the greens. So we've got the yellow, or we've got the darker earthy tones. I think something in a brighter green would work, and I'd have to think about what that might be. I'm sure there's something within the range of things, plant material that might be caught in a net. So even perhaps the seaweed, had I found seaweed that I think it's called sea lettuce, in fact, that is a very bright, almost a fluorescent green, had something that was really obviously green to bring out the tones of the other colours that are there. Space. The use of negative space on the left side balances the dense right section. Some areas of tangled material could be lightened slightly to allow more air between the elements, increasing definition. So this comes back again, yet again, here is another element and principle of design that is being not met in the best way possible, because I have made the design too compact, too dense by using some parts of it, just putting too many bits of things in, basically. Very technical. So let's have a look now at some of the suggestions, apart from what we've talked about as we've come through looking at those analyses. Let's look at the suggestions that our AI is making. First of all, enhance the focal point within the netting. Currently, the heavier mass on the right side dominates the composition. To strengthen the theme of caught in the net, more emphasis on entangled elements within the net could create a stronger focal point. So it's looking at having the net be more obvious and just have one or two things that are caught in the net to make that the focal area of the things that are caught in the net, rather than that right-hand side that is just the heavier mass of the dried seaweed. Define the right side density. The right mass is visually engaging but slightly overwhelming in contrast to the more open netting. Slightly reducing or strategically thinning parts of the dark material would help create more contrast and clarity. And I think, in essence, what I could have done is used more bleach. So it's all seaweed, some of it's bleached and some of it isn't. So obviously the lighter elements are bleached. And I do think that thinning it out a little bit more would help as well. So that they're both very good suggestions. We've got another couple of suggestions. Introduce a slight colour variation for depth. While the earthy tones work well, a deeper contrast with another subtle accent, a deep rust, dark blue or burgundy, could enhance dimensionality and add more intrigue to the trapped elements. And that's very true, and I think I'd probably go with the burgundy rather than the deep rust. I'd like to introduce another area of colour, if not the brighter greens as we talked about earlier. But it's only looking at a slight colour variation, just to give the design depth, to make it interesting and to make you look through the design. Slightly adjust the base for more stability. The base appears secure, but ensuring a slightly wider or heavier support may help reinforce stability, especially given the vertical height of the design. And now that I see this suggestion, I understand what was said earlier about the balance in the design. And so I think that's right. I think that the base is marginally too short, width-wise, for it to visually look as balanced as it could. It doesn't look like it's grounded. And I could have changed the colour of it as well. And I wonder whether making it darker might actually enhance it. What I could have done is had a piece of driftwood across the bottom and extended it out, and that would have added to the interpretation of the title, as well as providing a wider base that would have visually make it look like it was more stable. The final thought: this is a conceptually strong and visually impactful piece that effectively interprets the theme caught in the net. The contrast between structure and organic material, movement and texture makes it an engaging composition. A few refinements in focal balance, negative space and depth of contrast could further enhance its overall effect. And I think all of that's very true, and all of the suggestions are ones that I would consider. It is some considerable time since I did this design. It's probably 8 years since I did this design. So in that time, obviously, my skills have improved, But it is always good to look back at a design that you enjoyed at the time, that you thought was good at the time, or one that wasn't, and submit it to our AI, get this feedback, and then think about it again, because the chances are something similar will come along in a class title in years to come. And if not, at least you've had a chance to think about your interpretation and about the principles and elements of design and do a review. And it's not looking at where you made mistakes, it's looking at what is the journey, what is the education, what is the learning that you can get out of this process. With that, I will leave you to your floral art journey. I'm Kim Bailey and this is Floral Art Review.